I was standing in the grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel, wearing a $79 Zara dress, when my father announced he was giving my entire inheritance to my sister. 350 people applauded, as if erasing me was something worth celebrating. I was 28 years old, held a bachelor's degree in urban planning, and had spent the last 2 years working in the copy room of my family's $92 million real estate company for $42,000 a year, while my sister earned $280,000 as chief legal counsel. And in that moment, Gerald Whitford finally understood something he had spent 28 years making sure I never would. That I had been counting. It was May 15th, 2024. Spring in Manhattan, the kind of evening where the light through floor-to-ceiling windows turns everything gold, even cruelty. My father gave my sister a $13 million townhouse, a Tesla, and a CEO position in front of everyone who mattered. And he gave me table 27, behind a pillar, near where the kitchen staff stacked dirty plates. Before I go any further, be honest with yourself here. What would you have actually done? Not the version you tell people, what you would have actually done. Half the people I have told this to say they understand my choice, and the other half say it makes me just as bad as them. Both sides have made me think. Drop your answer. I read them. The plaza smelled like imported roses and wealthy people's perfume, crystal chandeliers, silk tablecloths, the kind of opulence that makes a $79 dress feel like a confession. I knew what was coming. Not the exact words, but I had seen the emails. The printer in the copy room had spit out a draft program 2 days earlier. Miranda's name appeared 6 times, mine did not appear at all. I could have stayed home, called in sick, invented an emergency. I went anyway. You want to know why? Here's the truth I have never said out loud until right now. I needed the wound fresh. I needed it public. I needed 350 witnesses so I could not later, in the middle of the night when doubt crept in, tell myself it was not that bad, that I was being sensitive, that they did not mean it. I chose to walk into that ballroom because I knew what was waiting in Jonathan Ellis's office. Eleanor's will, the 72-hour deadline, the clause that would not activate until the day Gerald publicly disinherited Dulce. I weaponized my own suffering, and I am not entirely clean of that choice. Let me take you back. Because you need to understand what Whitford Properties was before you can understand what it became. Eleanor Margaret Whitford founded the company in 1965, started with a single office in Brooklyn and 2 business partners who are long dead now. She walked across the Brooklyn Bridge every morning for 40 years, built an empire 1 lease at a time. The copy room where I worked. Basement level, fluorescent lights that buzzed like dying insects. That was where I learned how the company actually ran. Not from meetings I was never invited to, but from documents people left on the Xerox machine, from hallway conversations I overheard while standing perfectly still, holding a stack of contracts invisible. I have dyslexia, diagnosed at 7, and it takes me 3 times longer to read a contract than it takes Miranda. But here's what nobody ever noticed. I see patterns, the way clauses connect, the way a negotiation that looks good on page 4 falls apart on page 19 because of language someone buried in the addendum. My brain does not process words the way yours does. It builds architecture. That limitation my father mocked at every Christmas dinner, that was the thing that let me see what he could not. Gerald took over as chief executive officer in 2005 when Eleanor retired. That is the word the press release used, retired, like it was her choice. What actually happened? He called a board meeting, told her she was too old to understand modern business, tried to strip her voting rights. The vote failed, 7-5, and Eleanor's shares plus Margaret Coleman's were the deciding margin. Gerald smiled, shook her hand, told the board he respected their decision, and 18 months later, Eleanor wrote a new will. She did not tell him, did not warn him, just sat in her rent-controlled Upper West Side apartment. The one she kept since 1967, the one that smelled like lavender sachets and old books, and spent 5 years building the weapon that would destroy him. My grandmother did not stop my father with her voice, she stopped him with mine. Christmas 2018. The Whitford Townhouse. 740 Park Avenue, 20 family members around a table worth more than most people earn in a decade. Gerald stood to make a toast, raised his glass, smiled at Miranda. "To my brilliant daughter," he said, "who just made law review at Harvard, the future of this family." Then he looked at me, sitting at the far end, quiet. I had learned by then to stay quiet. "And Dulce is also here." 20 people laughed. I set my fork down, watched the candles flicker, the baccarat crystal catching light. I did not cry, because you learn not to cry when crying gives them what they want. But I counted the seconds until I could leave, the years I had been doing this, the salary gap between my sister and me, $238,000 a year for being born second and dyslexic. I counted everything. Miranda was not cruel. That is the part people always get wrong. She was terrified. Every achievement was a brick in a cage. Harvard was not a dream. It was a directive. And the $280,000 salary was not freedom. It was a leash made of gold. I watched her at family dinners. The way she straightened her posture when Gerald entered a room, the way she laughed at his jokes half a second before anyone else, like she was conducting an orchestra only she could hear. She defended him, because defending me meant risking her position, and if the slow sister could be valuable, what did that make Miranda's perfection? Replaceable. I understood her. I even pitied her. But understanding someone does not mean you let them erase you. You want to know what I actually think about my father? He's not a monster. Monsters are easier. You can hate a monster cleanly. Gerald's just a man who inherited an empire and spent 40 years pretending he built it. He reads contracts like a lawyer, looking for exploits, while Eleanor read them like an architect, seeing how the pieces connect. He knew the difference. He felt it every time someone mentioned her name at a board meeting with a reverence they never used for his. So he made sure I stayed small. Because if I could succeed despite my limitations, it exposed the truth. His success came from inheritance, not merit. I threatened the only story that let him sleep at night, and honestly, there's a part of me. Not small, I'm done pretending it's small. That understands exactly why he did it. Does that make me weak, or just exhausted? April 24th, 2024. I opened my email at 8:47 in the morning. Subject line, position restructuring. Confidential. Your current position will be eliminated effective July 1st, 2024. I read it 3 times. Not because I did not understand, but because I needed to be sure I was not misreading. Dyslexia makes you second-guess everything, even cruelty. I set my phone on the kitchen counter. The coffee maker was still running, and I watched it finish brewing before I moved. The apartment in Queens. $1,800 a month, split 3 ways. Beige walls the landlord painted in 2003, the bedroom wall that vibrated when the subway passed. That apartment had been temporary for 2 years. I kept telling myself it was temporary. The termination email made it permanent. Miranda's graduation party was May 15th, 6 weeks after I got fired. The timing was not coincidence. Gerald wanted me gone before he crowned her publicly, wanted the story clean. One daughter, brilliant, Harvard-educated, the future chief executive officer, and the other daughter, eliminated during organizational optimization. I knew what the Plaza announcement would be. I had seen enough draft programs, heard enough hallway conversations. I went anyway. Table 27, back of the ballroom, hidden behind a pillar. My table mates were distant cousins I had met twice in my life, people who did not know whether to pity me or ignore me, so they did both. Miranda stood on stage under a 12-piece orchestra, backlit like a saint. And Gerald took the microphone at 8:30. Miranda will inherit my entire estate, he said. The Park Avenue residence, the Tesla, and upon my retirement, the position of Chief Executive Officer of Whitford Properties. 350 people applauded. Nobody looked at table 27. I sat there. $79 dress, Goodwill clutch, hands folded in my lap. And I counted. The seconds, the witnesses, the years this had been building. And then I left, not dramatically. I just stood, walked to the coat check, collected my jacket, and stepped into the May evening like someone who had somewhere better to be. I did not cry until I reached the subway platform. I need to stop here because this is where people disagree. My father publicly disinherited me in front of 350 people after firing me 6 weeks earlier. And some people say I should have confronted him right there, while others say that would have meant giving him exactly what he wanted. A scene, a spectacle, proof that I was emotional and unstable. And then there is a third group. The group that says none of this happens if I had not gone to the plaza at all, if I had protected myself instead of walking into my own execution. And honestly, I cannot fully argue with that group. I have tried. What do you think? Lightning bolt emoji if Gerald is the main villain. Fire emoji if the situation itself was the real problem. Skull emoji if I made this worse myself. I read the comments on this section more carefully than any other, because this is the part I am still figuring out myself. I got home at 9:47. The apartment was empty, my roommates were out, and I sat on the edge of my bed. The one that creaked in 3 specific places I had learned to avoid. And I opened my closet. Top shelf, behind winter coats I had not worn in 2 years, a mahogany box with brass hinges. Eleanor gave it to me in March 2019, 5 months before she died. We were in her Upper West Side apartment, sunlight through lace curtains, the smell of lavender and old paper. When you need it, she said, you'll know. I had carried that box through 3 apartments, never opened it, never even tried. Because opening it felt like admitting I needed her, and needing her felt like admitting I could not handle my family on my own. But sitting there on May 15, 2024, in a $79 dress that smelled like someone else's perfume from standing too close at the plaza, I knew. I broke the wax seal. Inside, a USB drive, a handwritten note, and a business card. The note in Eleanor's careful script. Dulce. You are not slow. You were abandoned. This is not rescue. This is what you have always been owed. Use it when you are ready. I will not be there to see it, but I built this for you anyway. E. The business card. Jonathan Ellis, attorney at law. I plugged in the USB drive. 1 file. A recording from March 14th, 2018, a board meeting. Gerald's voice, clear as glass. Eleanor is 81 years old. She does not understand modern business. I moved to reduce her voting rights to 10%. Silence. Then Margaret Coleman, opposed. Eleanor built this company. This is an insult. The vote failed, 7-5. Eleanor had recorded her own son trying to strip her of power, then spent 18 months building the trap that would destroy him. She did not stop him in the moment. She waited, planned, turned me into the weapon she would never live to see fired. That is love. That is also manipulation, and I am still not sure which one matters more. At 9:15, my phone buzzed, unknown number. Miss Whitford. This is Jonathan Ellis. I believe you have opened the box. My hands were shaking. How did you know? The wax seal has a sensor. When it breaks, I receive an alert. We need to meet tonight. There is a timeline you need to understand. He was in Midtown. I took the subway, 43 minutes on the R train, standing because every seat was taken, holding the brass rail, watching my reflection in the dark window. I looked exactly like someone who had just been erased. Jonathan Ellis's office was on the 19th floor of a building that smelled like leather and old money. He was 71, white hair, the kind of lawyer who bills $800 an hour and earns every cent. He handed me a manila folder without preamble. Eleanor Whitford's last will and testament, executed September 12, 2019, witnessed, notarized, legal in all respects. I opened it. The first page was standard language. The second page was a nuclear bomb. I, Eleanor Margaret Whitford, being of sound mind, do hereby bequeath 51% of Whitford Properties LLC to my granddaughter, Dulce Ann Whitford, along with all associated voting rights as outlined in the original 1965 partnership agreement. 51%, $47 million, controlling interest in the company my father had run for 19 years. I looked up. This can't be real. It is real, but there is a condition. Of course there was. Jonathan leaned forward. The will activates only if you call an emergency board meeting within 72 hours of the moment Gerald publicly disinherits you. Eleanor predicted. Correctly, it seems. that he would eventually make his intentions clear in a way that could not be disputed. Tonight, at the Plaza Hotel, he did exactly that. You now have until 8:30 p.m. on May 18th to invoke the will. If you do not, the document becomes void, and everything reverts to the 2015 will, which leaves 100% of Eleanor's shares to Gerald. 72 hours, 3 days to decide whether to destroy my family or let them destroy me. Why the deadline? I asked. Jonathan's expression did not change. Because Eleanor knew you, she knew you would hesitate, doubt yourself, try to find a compromise that does not exist. The deadline eliminates hesitation, you act, or you lose everything. He slid another document across the desk. This is the board contact list. Margaret Coleman has already been briefed. She is waiting for your call. Robert Hartley, the board chairman, will convene an emergency meeting if you request it, but you need to request it in writing within 72 hours. I stared at the paper. 12 names, 12 people who would decide whether I was worth believing. What if they vote against me? Then you lose. But Eleanor did not think they would. She spent 40 years earning their respect. Gerald has spent 19 years spending it. I did not sleep that night. I sat at my kitchen table, the one that wobbled, propped up with folded cardboard. And I made a list. What I would lose. My father, already lost. But this would make it permanent. My mother, she would choose Gerald. She always chose Gerald. Miranda, maybe, maybe not, but probably. The possibility that someday they would love me without conditions. The version of my family I had spent 28 years hoping existed. What I would gain, 51% of a $92 million company. A salary I could actually live on. The ability to look at myself in the mirror without seeing someone who accepted $42,000 a year and a termination email without fighting back. Proof that Eleanor believed in me, even if my parents never did. What I would become. The granddaughter who destroyed her father's legacy. The woman who used a dead woman's plan instead of saving herself. Someone my family would call ruthless, calculating, ungrateful, or the woman who finally stopped waiting for permission to exist. At 3 a.m, I opened my laptop. Subject: Emergency Board Meeting Request. To Robert Hartley, Board Chairman, Whitford Properties, LLC. Dear Mr. Hartley, pursuant to Eleanor Whitford's last will and testament, executed September 12, 2019, I am invoking my right to call an emergency board meeting to address a transfer of shares and associated voting rights. I am available at your earliest convenience. Respectfully, Dulce Ann Whitford. I hovered over the send button for 11 minutes. Then I thought about table 27, the pillar, the applause, and Dulce is also here. I hit send at 3:17 a.m. Robert Hartley called me at 7:30 the next morning. Miss Whitford, I have reviewed the documents Jonathan Ellis sent over. The board will convene on May 18th at 10 a.m., Whitford Tower, 42nd floor. You will need to present the will, answer questions, and make your case. This is not a formality. Some board members are loyal to your father. You will need to convince them. I understand. Do you? His voice was not unkind, just careful. Because once you walk into that boardroom, there is no going back. You will either leave with control of the company, or you will leave with nothing, and a family that will never forgive you for trying. Are you prepared for that? I thought about the termination email, the Plaza, 28 years of being also here. Yes, I said. I am prepared. It was not until I opened my email on May 17th, 24 hours before the board meeting, that I understood what Margaret Coleman had actually been doing, not waiting, preparing. An email thread, forwarded to me by mistake, or maybe not by mistake at all. Subject: Concerns re. Leadership and fiduciary responsibility. Margaret to Richard Holloway, Susan Parker, 3 other board members. Gerald's decision to terminate Dulce 6 weeks before publicly disinheriting her raises questions about his judgment. Eleanor built this company on integrity, and I am not convinced Gerald shares that value. If Dulce presents a credible alternative, I intend to support her. Richard Holloway's response: Agreed. Gerald's management style has become increasingly autocratic. I would welcome new leadership. Susan Parker: I have been waiting for someone to say this out loud for 5 years. Eleanor had not just left me 51% of the company, she had spent 5 years positioning the board to accept it. She did not rescue me. She armed me. And then she died, knowing I would have to pull the trigger myself. Here's what I've never said before. There's a part of me, not a small part. I'm done pretending it's small, that resents Eleanor for this. She could have fought Gerald herself. She had the power, the respect, the votes, and she could have fired him in 2018 after he tried to strip her voting rights, publicly humiliated him the way he humiliated me. But she didn't. She built a time bomb, set the fuse for 5 years, and made me the one who had to detonate it. I'm grateful. I'm also furious, because even now, even with $47 million and a board meeting in 12 hours, I wonder, if Eleanor hadn't done this, would I have ever been strong enough to leave on my own? Or would I have spent the rest of my life at table 27, telling myself it was fine, it was family, it was love? I don't know, and not knowing is worse than anything Gerald ever did to me. May 18th, 2024, 9:45 a.m. I stood outside Whitford Tower wearing a navy suit I bought at Goodwill for $43. My hands were shaking, I had not eaten breakfast, had not slept more than 2 hours. The elevator ride to the 42nd floor took 93 seconds. I counted every one. The boardroom smelled like Italian marble and expensive leather. 12 chairs around an oval walnut table, Eleanor's portrait above the fireplace, eyes that seemed to follow me as I walked in. Gerald was already seated. To his right, Miranda in a charcoal suit that cost more than my rent, and to his left, Priscilla, diamonds at her throat, the smell of Chanel No. 5. They did not look at me. Robert Hartley sat at the head of the table. Miss Whitford, please sit. The chair at the far end. Cracked leather, the guest seat, the place you put people who do not belong. I sat. You have called this meeting to invoke Eleanor Whitford's will, Robert said. The board has reviewed the document. It is legally sound. The question before us is whether to honor Eleanor's wishes or to challenge them. You have 15 minutes to make your case. 15 minutes to justify my existence. I opened the $12 portfolio I had bought at Goodwill and pulled out 3 documents. Eleanor Whitford built this company in 1965. I said. My voice was steady. I had practiced this 40 times in my apartment. She started with one office in Brooklyn and turned it into a $92 million empire. She did not inherit it. She built it. I slid the first document across the table. The original 1965 partnership agreement. This agreement states that founder shares carry permanent voting rights that cannot be diluted. Eleanor held 51% of those shares, and she is transferring them to me. Gerald leaned forward. Dulce, this is. I am not finished. The room went silent. I slid the second document across. The March 14th, 2018 board meeting recording transcript. In 2018, my father attempted to strip Eleanor of her voting rights, claiming she was too old to understand modern business. The vote failed, but the attempt revealed something important. Gerald does not value the people who built this company. He values control. Margaret Coleman nodded, once barely visible. I slid the third document, my termination email. 6 weeks ago, my father fired me. Not because I was unqualified, not because the position was unnecessary, but because he did not want me present at the Plaza Hotel when he announced Miranda's inheritance. He eliminated me to clean up the story. Miranda flinched. First time I had seen her react. I have worked for this company for 2 years. I continued. I earned $42,000 a year, while my sister earned $280,000 for the same last name. I was seated at table 27 at the Plaza Hotel behind a pillar, while my father gave her a $13 million townhouse and a CEO position. I have been excluded, diminished, and erased. Not because I lack ability, but because I lack the credentials my father values. I looked at Gerald. He was staring at the table. Eleanor believed credentials do not equal worth. She believed character matters more than degrees. And she believed I could run this company not because I am better than my father, but because I understand what it means to be invisible. And people who have been invisible do not make other people disappear. Silence. Robert Hartley looked around the table. The board will now vote. The question. Do we honor Eleanor Whitford's will and transfer 51% of company shares to Dulce Ann Whitford? Or do we challenge the will and maintain current ownership structure? All in favor of honoring the will. Margaret Coleman's hand went up. Then Richard Holloway, Susan Parker, 4 more, 7 votes. All opposed. Gerald, Priscilla, Miranda, 1 other. 4 votes. Robert Hartley set down his pen. The will is honored. Effective immediately. Dulce Ann Whitford holds 51% of Whitford Properties LLC and all associated voting rights. He paused. There is one more matter. Given the concerns raised about current leadership, I move for a vote of no confidence in Gerald Whitford as Chief Executive Officer. Gerald's head snapped up. You cannot. I can, and I am all in favor. 7 hands. Opposed. 4 hands. The motion passes. Gerald Whitford is removed as Chief Executive Officer effective immediately. The board will appoint an interim CEO while we conduct a search for permanent leadership. Gerald stood, did not look at me, walked out. Priscilla followed. Miranda stayed. Sat there, staring at her hands. After 30 seconds, she looked up. I did not know, she said quietly. About the termination email, I did not know he was going to do that. I believed her, that was the worst part. It does not change anything, I said. I know. She stood, walked to the door, stopped. For what it is worth, she said, not turning around. I voted against you because I was afraid, not because I thought you were wrong. Then she left. 3 people changed their behavior in the weeks after the board meeting. Margaret Coleman invited me to lunch, not to celebrate, to teach. She spent 2 hours explaining the company's financial structure, the board dynamics, the relationships Eleanor had built over 40 years. She did not do this because I asked. She did it because she had been waiting 19 years for someone to care about what Eleanor built instead of what Gerald inherited. Richard Holloway stopped calling me Miss Whitford, started calling me Dulce. Small thing, but it meant he saw me as a colleague, not a child playing dress-up in a boardroom. And Jonathan Ellis sent me a bill for $17,000 in legal fees. Then attached a note. Eleanor prepaid this 6 years ago. You owe nothing. Build something worth the cost. Truth changes behavior without permission. Here is what I won. 51% of a $92 million company. A salary of $185,000 as Director of Sustainable Development. An apartment in Brooklyn Heights with a view of the bridge Eleanor walked across for 40 years. The ability to look at myself without seeing someone who accepted erasure as love. Here is what it cost. My father calls once a month now. Short conversations, weather, the apartment, work. He does not apologize, he cannot, because apologizing would mean admitting he built his entire identity on a lie. The calls are his way of saying, I see you now, but I cannot say it out loud. I answer. Not because I forgive him, but because he lost the company, the board, the only kingdom he ever knew. And if I do not answer, he loses the last piece of himself that is not defined by what he inherited. He is trying to earn my presence the way I once tried to earn his love, through quiet, insufficient gestures that will never be enough. That is more tragic than rage. Here is what I have never said before. There is a part of me, not a small part. I am done pretending it is small, that wanted them to beg. Not apologize. Beg. I wanted Gerald to show up at my apartment and admit he was wrong. I wanted Priscilla to call and say she was ashamed. I wanted Miranda to choose me over the empire. Just once. They did not. And 6 months later, I am still deciding whether that makes them irredeemable or just human. Gerald did something 2 weeks ago I did not expect. He sent a check to the Brooklyn office. The original 1965 building Eleanor started in. With a note. For preservation, so people remember where it began. $20,000. Anonymous. Except I recognized his handwriting. I need a real answer from you. Not the one you think you should give, the one you actually think. Type the number 1 if you think it was genuine. Type the number 2 if you think it was calculated. Type the number 3 if you think the distinction does not matter. Your answers determine whether I tell the rest of this because what happened after, I am not sure I am ready to say to a small audience. Some things need the right number of people before they can be spoken. Last week, I was in my apartment in Brooklyn Heights. Morning light through the window, coffee brewing, the radiator clanging the way it does at 3 a.m. and 8 a.m. and no other time. On my desk, the mahogany box Eleanor gave me in 2019. Empty now, except for one thing. A photograph. Eleanor in 1965, standing in front of the Brooklyn office, holding blueprints, wearing a suit that costs less than my Zara dress. She is smiling. Not for the camera, at something off to the left. I do not know what she was looking at, but I know what she saw. A future, built by her hands, inherited by someone who would not waste it. I keep the photo on my desk. Some days it feels like love. Other days it feels like a debt I will never finish paying. Both can be true. If this story made you feel something you were not expecting, you already know what to do. Not because I am asking, but because this only reaches the people who need it if it moves. There is something I did not tell you. Miranda's response when she found out Eleanor had been planning this since 2019, that she knew about the board meeting, that she could have warned Gerald but chose silence instead. I have gone back and forth. If this reaches 10,000 people, I will tell it. Some things deserve the right size room before they are spoken out loud. The people who end up here, I did not expect what you would become. You disagree with each other, you sometimes disagree with me, but you think before you type. That is rarer than you know. Stay. I was 28 years old when I stopped waiting for my family to see me. I am 29 now. Some mornings I wake up and I still check my phone, hoping for a message from my mother. An apology, an explanation, anything. It does not come. But the coffee still brews. The bridge is still visible from my window, and the company Eleanor built, the one she walked across that bridge to start in 1965, is still standing. Not because I am brilliant, not because I am ruthless, but because I finally understood what Eleanor spent 5 years trying to teach me. You are not slow. You were abandoned. And once you know the difference, you stop waiting for the people who abandoned you to come back. You build something new with the people who stayed. Eleanor's last words to me, whispered in hospice while I held her hand and my father scheduled conference calls in the hallway. When you need it, you'll know. I know now. What I needed was not rescue. It was permission to save myself. She gave it to me 5 years before I was ready to use it. And that impossible, infuriating, devastating gift is the only inheritance that ever mattered.